Hi, welcome to this practical 10. I'm going to actually explain the codes, all right, for this practical. So this practical 10 focuses on relationship between classes, right? So let's look at the task 1, all right? So create classes based on the following diagram. So over here, right, we have three different classes. They are all actually entity classes, all right? Entity classes mean that they are basically a Java class, okay, classes that actually used to store information. So if you look at here, student, right, it stores information, student ID, student name, all right, and could be other attributes. Payment, all right, is another entity class where it stores ID, description, date, and other attributes. And we have address. The next that we need to look at is relationship types, right? So over here we have two different types of relationships. One is association, the other one is has a relationship, all right? So student makes payment. So in this, if you look at these two particular classes, right, we can actually um, look at from the relationship, right, from left to right, and then the other one is right to left. So if you are looking at from left to right, so you need to look at this particular multiplicity. All right, a student, it's not necessary to make a payment, for example. All right, so you put here 0. 0 means optional, and then a student, right, can make maximum of 10 payments. All right, so here we put 10, for example. All right, and if you are looking from payment to student, then you have to look at this. All right, this multiplicity. Each payment, right, okay, should involve at least one student. Okay, this is mandatory, at least one, and maximum one, which means that each payment, right, should come from maximum one student. All right, you cannot have like a payment, right, that is being shared by two students, cannot, right? So that is why you have here one and one. All right, so this kind of relationship, right, is actually bi-directional, all right, because a student connects to the payment, and then payment actually connects back to the student. Okay, so here we can have bi-directional. Over here, right, is unidirectional, right? So if you look at here, right, there is no arrow, right, pointing at the payment, and then the other one, right, is also not pointing at student, right? So it's like a straight line. So straight line means is actually indicating that it's a bidirectional relationship. All right, a student is connected to the payment, and the payment is connected back to the student. So over here is unidirectional because we can see clear cut, right, arrow. All right, it's indicating only one way, right? So this relationship is much more stronger than this one. Okay, has a relationship, and this is actually has a, actually there are two types. One is the composition, the other one is aggregation. So this diamond shape, right, actually reflects has a relationship, and when there is no anything, this is not shaded, right? So this is aggregation. All right, composition means it will be shaded. All right, so composition is stronger than relationship, stronger than aggregation, right? So student has address. All right, student must have at least one address and can be more than one. So I put here, right, asterisk. All right, so because we can't be like, have a definite number right there, right? So it can be a 2 or 3 or whatever things, right? So you just put here 1 and then followed by asterisk here. Okay, so this is unidirectional and this is bidirectional, right? A straight line. And then we need to look at the state of each entity class. All right, so the state of student is, right, it has student ID, student name, and other attributes. And likewise payment, it has a different state. Okay, now we need to create three entity classes, and then we need to create these relationships. And then after that, right, technically, right, every entity class, okay, every entity class, you should have a controller, right, or we can call it as a service, right, that will have business logics. For example, like a student, okay, in the real world, right, definitely, right, we need to do some operations that are actually related to student. For example, like add student, delete student, update student, search student, so on. And also the payment, right, we need to have like business operations like add payment, delete payment, edit payment, all right, update payment, search payment, so on. And then address also, right, we need to have, all right, like add address or update address and so on, right. So over here, right, we need to make a right decision. Okay, do we need to have controllers for every entity class? That depends. If you have like over here, right, this is like whenever you create a student, then you will create an object of address, right. So this address, right, is object, right, it depends on the is controlled, the lifespan of the address object is actually controlled by the student object, which means that in the student class, all right, whenever you create a student object, then the address object will be created, all right. uh, I don't say it's automatically, right, but it means actually a mandatory to create address object, all right, in the student class. So this address object, right, is dependent on student, right. So which means that whenever you create a student object, then it is a compulsory, right, to create address object. Okay, but this one could be different, all right. So you can create a student object, payment object separately, all right. So you don't have to like whenever student make when you create an object of student, it's not necessary, right, right away, right, you create a payment object. Okay, so this is a bit loosely coupled, all right. So this is independent, but this is kind of like dependent, all right, on the student object. Okay, so when you have such situation, right, then if you have like independent and so on, right, then we can have a service or controller classes for payment and then student. So when you see like you have a nested relationships, okay, which means that student has address, right. Okay, so this will be a student has, all right. So each student, right, will have a address object, right. Then you can create a controller, right, for both actually, right. You can create a controller, just one controller, right, to that will manage the student, okay, and its nested object now address. We can do that. Okay, so right now we keep it simple, all right. So we'll just have a controller class that performs the following operations. So maybe let's say we have a student controller, or we call it as service student, something like that. And we will have all these methods, all right, add payment, add address, find student by payment, remove address, and so on, right. So we are kind of creating a general controller, okay, that will do all these business operations, right, add payment, add address, remove address, okay, find student by payment. Okay, so in the real world, of course, we need to have more controllers. Okay, so for now we create a general controller, right, that will do all these business operations. Okay, after that, once we have constructed the controller, then we need to test, where we need to create a driver class, right. So all in, right, for this practical we need to have 3 classes there. Okay, and then we have one controller and then one more driver class. Okay, so since we have actually done all this, right, in practical 10, I'll just explain the codes, right. Okay, now the first thing that we have to do, right, we go to the student, right. So if you look at here student, all right, so we will start creating this. Because this is an entity class, we need to create all these the basic constructs, like what you call attributes. So string student ID, string student name, okay, and then other attributes, all right. So other attributes, right, include, all right, relationship attributes. I call it relationship attributes, right. How to bind this, right, student binding the payment class, how actually, right, bind student and then address class, all right. So we need to have other attributes that actually we can create relationship or associate, all right, between student and payment, and then student and address. So if you look at here, right, a student can make more than one payment, right, and a student can have more than one address. So we need to create an array, because each student, right, can make more than one payment. Each student can have more than one address, which means that we need to create an array, right? So if you look at here, payment, new payment. Okay, so maximum I put here 10, because I'm going to follow this 10. All right, since we have given, right, we know the definite figure, right, number, right, how many payments, right, that can be done by a particular student. So we use a static array over here, a payment, a new payment, right? So which means that we are creating, whenever you create a student object, right, you create a dedicated uh, array, right, to store payment objects. Okay, so you have an array. Okay, so you are creating an array having 10 boxes, and this array, right, is capable of storing payment object payment object. On top of this, right, we also need to create association, right, between student and address. And because we will not know, right, how many addresses will be, right, for each student, so we will use a dynamic array, array list, and then we need to indicate here, right, what kind of type, or what kind of object, all right, that this array list, right, can store. So we put here address, all right, and then followed by new array list. So which means you are creating two arrays in the student class. Okay, so it makes sense, because this student class is actually connected to the payment and then address. So this is actually the other attributes, right, that we need to create, right? So on top of this, right, is also actually making sense to keep track how many students, right, we have created. Means that, for example, in a particular class, right, you may have like 30 students or 40 students, all right. So we it's always it is quite common, right, to keep track, all right, number of students, right, that we have created. So if we have created 30 objects, right, then we will create a variable, right, to store, all right, or to keep track number of students, right. So over here, right, I made it static. This is a variable, right, that is static, because I just need to have one copy in the entire memory, right, just to keep track the number of students, right. All this actually instance variables, and this also, right, instance variables, because these variables, right, are actually specific to the object. Okay, so every student, right, will have a different student ID, student name, will have different kind of payments, number of payments, and different kind number of addresses, right. So therefore, right, all this, right, should be made instance variables, right. But for this one, it's static, because I just need to have one copy, right, and this number of students, right, will be same across any student objects, right. So therefore, right, it's not really making sense to make this as instance variable, right. So this is a non-instance variable. We call it a class variable, right, whenever we put here static. And then we also need to keep track, right, number of payments that a particular student has done. So I'm creating another instance variable, number of payments and number of addresses as well, right. So this both, right, should be an instance variable as well, right, because this is actually specific to a particular student object. Okay, so we don't put here static, right. So different student will have a different number of payments, different students will have different number of addresses, and so on, right. So we just want to keep track. All right, for example, if we have a student A, we want to find out, okay, how many payments that the student A has done, right, or how many addresses, all right, for this particular student, and so on, right. So it varies actually, all right, from one object to another object, all right. So that is why this will be an instance variable. Okay, next is as I mentioned just now, right, this number of students we need to keep track, right. So when more students, all right, let's say enroll, right, for a particular module, right, then we need to find a way, right, to increase the number of students, all right, the value, right, for this number of students variable. So I have this number of students plus plus, right? So this is equivalent to writing number of students equals to number of students plus 1, and I simply created this as a method, right, as static, because we are dealing with not instance variables but a static variable. So a static variable, right, should be referenced using static context. So that is why it is static. So it's not a it's not that if you don't put static here, right, this will not work. But good practice is static context, static variable should be referenced in a static context, static method. So that is why I put it here static. Okay, and whenever you call this method, right, you will reduce, right, the value in number of students, right. Next I have get number of students. Yeah, right, so I need to find out. All right, let's say I want to find out, okay, how many students, all right, actually have enrolled for this course or whatever, right. Then I need to have a method, okay, just retrieving the number of students. Again I put here static. Next is increase payment. So over here I didn't put static because this should be this is actually is a instance variable, right. So over here we didn't put static, right. Increase number of payments, okay, and then decrease number of addresses, and then increase and decrease, okay, and get number of payments, get number of addresses, just like for this one, okay, for number of students, okay. On top of this, right, we will have a default constructor, and then you have parameterized constructor, okay, and then we have a method to return, right, the address of the array, and then we also have a method to return, right, the address, okay, array, right, okay. So you have return address and so on. So we don't need to actually have a setter for this, because we are creating here, right, okay. So we are creating an array here, okay, we are creating an array, right. So this arrays, right, will be referenced by other classes, so they just need to have getters, all right, no need setters, okay, unless this is not created here, all right, then probably we need to have setter, all right. Okay, then as usual, right, we need to have this method to display the content of an object, which is the toString, okay. So but this is the very important thing, right, all these variables, right, other attributes. And then next we look at payment, okay, payment, okay. So payment, we have payment ID, payment description, payment date, and then we have student. So when you have this, right, it will create a bi-directional, right. So this is already connected to this, and other attribute, right, we need to connect back to the student, right. So we need to create this, we need to have this variable student and student, because each payment, right, should be done by only one student. So it should not be an array here, right. So it's a single object, okay, student, right. And then we have all this constructors, okay, and then we have a default, and then as usual we have getters and setters. And obviously, right, we need to also have getters and setters for this as well, student ID, right. So do you have that? Okay, if you don't have that, then we can just simply create that. So I can just use generate, okay, and then getters and setters for both, okay. So you can have here, right, get student ID, get student name, and so on, right, because these are entity classes, okay. Then we have all those things, required things. And if you look at here, we need to have this return student. This is very important, okay. We need to have that, okay. Okay, so once we have done this, next we look at the address. Address, right, is is just a unidirectional, okay. So if you look at here, we have address, street name, state, okay, getters and setters, all right, quite simple here. We don't have any variable that actually referencing, okay, referencing the student, all right. So it's one way, right, okay, that's it, nothing much here. So once we have done everything here, okay, next we will construct the controller, right. So we go here, controller. Now over here, right, the controller, this is a very general controller, right, that actually perform business operations related to student payment and so on, right? Okay, but of course when you develop a proper program, then you may have a few controllers. Okay, so right now, to keep it simple, so we have private static array list student, right? So basically this array, right, is to store student objects, right? So here is different. Okay, so if you look at the student here, right, this is storing payments and this is storing address, right? So each student, right, um, each student object will have payment array, and then you have address array. Okay, so this controller, right, basically controls the student. Okay, so that is why we have here student, right, array, right? Okay, so this is dynamic array. Okay, so you put here a static. Okay, so if you look at here, um, this is different. We didn't put static. Okay, so the reason is because this one actually um, related to the object. Okay, but over here, right, controller, right, this one I put static because in the entire memory, right, I just need to create one array, right, that can actually store student objects. Okay, so that is why I actually put static, means that you only have one copy, right, in the entire array, in the entire memory, right, an array that is capable of storing students, right? So it makes sense, right? So we don't want to have like a controller, right? Each time when we create a controller, okay, a new object of a controller, right, will have a different um, um, arrays, right, to store student objects, right? So that will have impact on consistency and so on. We just want to have one array that is capable of storing student objects. Okay, so I put here static. Okay, next I need to have a method, all right, to return the address of the array. Okay, so you have get return. So this controller, right, or service, right, is different from entity class in that it may not have any states, or it may not actually store any information, right? So you may have just performing business operations, okay, logics and so on, right? So over here I have add student. Okay, so add student, all right, so you have student and then add, all right. So this is actually is the array list, right? It's a built-in method that you can actually add student object. So once you have added the student object, then you need to increase number of students, right? So this is the class name, because increase number of students. If you go back here, okay, increase number of students, right? So this is static method, right? So you don't have to create an object to access this. I can just use the class name, which is a student dot increase number of students. That's it. Okay, so each time when you create a new student, right, then we need to do this like add student, right, and this will increase, right? The value will actually increase, right? Number of students, right? We'll add object. Then you have bidirectional, okay, relationships. This is uses add payment. Okay, add payment, right? Of course, you can have edit payment, delete payment, and so on, right? So to keep it simple, I'll just show you add payment first. Okay, so this add payment, right, if you look at here, first you need to understand this the method signature. So find that this add payment, right, receives two objects. Okay, these are objects, not primitive data types, student and the payment, right? So accordingly, right, when you later on when you create a method, right, you need to have a method, you need to create a method that actually matching the signature, right, parameters. So I'm creating a student as and payment P, and then when you receive the object, okay, so we need to add this. We look at here payment. Okay, so as get payment, right? So this is an object of student, and this student, right, it has its own array, right, to store the payment. So when you say get payment, right, this will return the address of the payment, which is here, address of the payment, right? In order to get the address of the payment, then you have here this one, get payment. Okay, so you get the address of the first box of the array. After that, right, once you get the address of the array, then we need to determine, right, which box that you want to place this payment object. Okay, So as get number of payments, right? Okay, so get number of payments. Okay, so initially, right, if you look at here, okay, get number of payments. Yeah, right, get number of payments, right? So initially, right, will be 0, right? Okay, all this will be initialized to 0. Number of payments, number of addresses. So initial value will be 0. Okay, so when you execute this for the very first time, it will get you 0, right? Number of payments 0, and here the entire thing will be 0, which means that you want to place the payment object for a particular student, right, in the first box. So the P is actually is the payment object, right? So this is payment. I will say that, okay, yeah, this is connecting to the student to payment. Okay, so this is supposed to be student to payment. Okay, so this will be relationship, and this will be a payment to student. The binding, right? So the student to payment, right? So once you have done this, next is use this bidirectional, right? So you have to you connect it here, right, from student to payment, and then you have to connect from the payment to the student back, right? So that is why you have this relationship, the P set student. So set student, right, you can find over here, right, the payment class set student. Yeah, this is a set student, right? Okay, so this method allows us, right, to connect from payment to the student, right? Okay, so the payment to the student. So after that, we need to increase the number of payment. That's it. Okay, so as is actually referring to the student object increase number of payment, right? So when you execute this, is that the payment, right, will be increased from 0 to 1, right? So we know that this particular student, right, has done one payment. Okay, the second time you execute, right, this will be 2, means that probably the same student, right, has done 2 payments. Okay, and right now, right, this will be placed, the payment object, the new payment object, right, will be placed into the second box. All right, so that's how it goes. Okay, so this is a bidirectional. Okay, bidirectional, and next we look at the unidirectional. Okay, so unidirectional has a relationship, right? So add address, and if you look at here, we have student and then address, right? It received 2 objects. Okay, um, so get address and get the array. After that, add, because this add, right, is a dynamic, right? So this is static, so you need to find the index and so on, right? So it's quite easy. Add and then add address object, that's it, and then increase number of address, that's it, right? And then we have a remove address and so on. Okay, get number of payments, get number of address. Okay, this is, let's say you want to find out how many number of payments, all right, how many addresses for a particular student. All right, so you just need to supply a particular student or object. Next we have find student by payment, right? Okay, find student by payment, right? So we just apply the payment object. Okay, and then we'll be able to know, right, we can get the detail of the student. Okay, so P get student, right? So this is an example where we actually getting the students details from the payment, right? So when you supply the payment object, then we will be able to find out, right, which student, right, okay, has done the payment, right? So this is like a backtracking, right? So we can find the student details, all right, using the payment object, right? So that's what this method is for, right? Okay, find student by payment, right? So we just apply this and then return get student, right? So get student refers here the get student, return the student, right? Because it's already associated, right, with the student, right? So and then to string, right? So you'll be able to get the student object to string, right? You get entire details of the student. Okay, so that is the thing, right, that that we need to have in the controller class. Okay, with all these methods, of course you can actually have more methods, all right, a lot of methods you can have here, right, because you may have a lot of business operations here. Okay, so you can consider all this, right, like sort of like a feature. Okay, a feature, right, that you can do for payment, add address, delete, and all those things. Okay, next is the driver. Okay, driver, right, so we create a controller object, and then we create two student objects, and then we need to actually add this these objects into the um, array list. All right, so see add student, right, controller add students. So this is an object add students. So we go to the controller, can you see that we are calling this method, and we can add an object of student, right, and then it will stop. Okay, so we are doing two times because you have two objects here, right, so we are actually sending one object at a time to the add student method. And then we have controllers, right, add payment as well. So this add payment, right, will call invoke this add payment. So we need to send two objects here. So we have s1 is actually the object, student object that we created earlier, and then we are creating on the spot a new payment object. Okay, so the payment object, we need to supply all these parameters, for example. Okay, and then s2, right, so right now, right, we know that s1 has done two payments. Okay, if you have new payment, we are sending the same object, and s2 actually has done one payment. Okay, so if you run this, okay, get number of students, student get number of students, you get two students. Okay, because you only have added two students, right, into the array list. And then we want to find out number of payments done by s1, right, so definitely it will give you two. Number of payments done by s2 is just one, right, technically you should get one here. Next is the add address, right, so add address, we are supplying the student object and the new address object. Okay, we are creating that. Okay, and if you want to find out how many addresses for a particular student, then we have to go through like this: controller get students, right, controller get students. Okay, so if you look at here, get student, you have that, yeah, controller. Okay, so get student. Okay, get students, so get students, this one. All right, okay, so first we need to get the array of student. Okay, so this will get you this get students, right, array, and we are using the class name because we are working with static variable, right. Okay, so therefore, right, it's a static method as I mentioned just now, right. Okay, so get students, so we are using the class name to access this method. Okay, and then once you get the array list, right, then we need to specify, okay, which object. Okay, so this is the index, the first object, and then get number of addresses. Okay, all right, so number of addresses, I guess the first box, right, in the array list, right, is actually belong to this s1, right. Okay, s1, right, get students get 0, referring to the first one. All right, s1, because we're adding this one first. Okay, followed by this, right. So definitely, right, over here we get two addresses because for the same object, right, s1 get number of addresses. Okay, and then once we will test here, right, remove address. For example, if we want to remove the address, one of the addresses we removed. So which one we removing? We are removing the first one, right, because get 0, get 1 means you are removing the second address. Okay, so you are getting here the array of student, and then the first box, and then we are getting the address array of address. Okay, and then the first box we are removing, right. So when you run this, you're supposed to get 1 here. Okay, here's 2, here's 1. So this is like a chain relationship, right. So first we get the array students, after that we get the array of address and so on, because student has addresses, right? Student has address, right? So first we need to retrieve get the students array, for that followed by address array. Okay, so this is an example where we want to display, right? Okay, we want to find out, uh, we want to display, right, the addresses, okay, for the first student, right? I guess it should be S1, all right, and then get address. Okay, so when you run this, you're able to display the details, all right? We have two addresses here. Okay, next is the find student by payment, right? So what we are doing right now is find student by payment, right? So find student by payment, go back here, find student by payment. Okay, so we need to supply payment object. All right, so what we are doing here, right, is we are supplying the payment object, get the array of the student, the first box, and then payment. All right, the payment, right, get payment actually referring is actually address. All right, so if you go here, get payment is over here, this one, right? Get payment. Okay, get payment, this one. Okay, get payment. So this is also an address, right? So we need to specify, okay, which box, right? Is it the first box or second box? Okay, so put here 0. Okay, so this will actually return the details of the student. Okay, so this is how we construct the relationships, right? Association relationship, hazard relationships, okay, and then constructing business operations, okay, the codes for business operations. So if you look at here, the controller, okay, so we have all these features, all right? So and of course we can actually add more things here. Okay, it's not an issue, but we need to understand, right, how to construct business operations logics here. Okay, and then passing objects, receiving objects, how to create association, how to create hazard relationship, and so on, right? So this binding is important, right? Attributes that are related to the binding, right, are very important, right, to connect um, two classes, right, between student and payment, between student and address. Okay, so I actually advise you to try out task 2 by yourself, right? So first you need to understand the concept. After that you can actually apply, right, the concept that you acquired, okay, for task 2. Okay, so the next video, right, will be I'll be talking on inheritance. Okay, all right, so take care and we'll catch up with you.